Alright, I am back with another Destiny 2 video, and needless to say, this is not about Reset. This is a continuation talking about the events that happened yesterday, where there were widespread layoffs at Bungie and reports of a delay for the final Shape and Marathon. I thought this was, we'd seen the worst of it yesterday, though late last night, early this morning, there's news that Michael Salvatore has left the company. There was some confusion or debate about whether he was fired or whether he was just given some sort of early retirement package where it's like, hey, bud, you better early retire or else. But the end result is the same. He appears to have left the company. He's changed his website bio to remove all mentions of Bungie, which I don't know if you would do that if you had just peacefully retired. And then he's not the only music person that left. There's an additional composer. Sorry, I can't remember their name at the moment, but they also worked on Deep Stone Lullaby, or they were responsible for Deep Stone Lullaby. I think I owe it to them to actually look up their name because it was in my article today. That was, I think it was another Michael. That was Michael Seacrest, who was also laid off. That is, we do not know how many people on the music team were indeed laid off, but the fact that it's Salvatore, who, you can critique many of the higher up people at Bungie, and he's obviously a very senior level person of the company, but everybody loves Michael Salvatore. Everybody thinks his soundtrack is incredible for every Destiny release there's been. I don't think anyone has ever had anything but glowing praise for his and his team's music. And as bad as yesterday was, this really made things exponentially worse. Just this one guy, because it's just so representative of not only did they fire some of their most forward-facing community people, Liana, Sam, social media, Griffin, and then all these other disciplines too, people that are obviously very important that are not as public facing, but then Salvatore, where it's just he's like your MVP, and whether you early retired him or fired him or whatever, doesn't matter because the end result's the same and he's not going to be making Destiny music anymore. So this has all led to a conversation about is this the beginning of the end for Destiny? Is this the end of Destiny? Is Bungie abandoning Destiny if they're taking all these key people out of it? Marathon's coming. There's kind of two sides of this. The first side is pretty easy to answer because it's no, this is not the physical end of Destiny. This could be the end of your specific interest in Destiny, and Lord knows it is not landing with me terribly well, but Bungie has to keep making Destiny content for the foreseeable future. You have to realize that this isn't, EA or Activision or Ubisoft or whatever that has all these simultaneous franchises they're juggling, whatever. Bungie is Destiny 2. That is the only game Bungie has. And that is their only revenue source that they are providing for themselves and for Sony right now. They obviously have other games in incubation, like Marathon and this other Gummy Bears game, but those are A, far away, and B, no guarantee that they will be a huge hit, much less a Destiny level hit, where as much as we critique it, still has a metric ton of players and still brings in a lot of money. So no, you can't just stop Destiny development and be like, well, Final Shape is it. We're canceling the episodes. No more Destiny content. That won't happen. It can't happen based on just the structure of how Bungie has invested pretty much everything in Destiny at the moment and used it to create runway for these future projects. However, that does not mean we are about to not see that means we are likely about to see an accelerated decline for Destiny, barring any some sort of dramatic reversal or announcement or something that gives people hope that Bungie is not abandoning this or not significantly reducing resources and et cetera, et cetera. This is the complete opposite of that, pretty heartening Joe Blackburn, I'm sorry for the bad state of the game thing where it was really, really specific on here's the things we're going to do. We're listening to you. Here's what's changing. This was bad. We should have done this. Now all of that goodwill is wiped out. And we don't know how involved Blackburn himself was in any of this. the only person everyone's mad at is Pete Parsons, who came out with this like really generic, like, we're sad about this. So many talented people let go. And it's like, bro, you probably fired them, like, or you made this decision. It is hard for me to see player sentiment returning to anywhere approaching positive anytime soon. What if this final shape delay is real? That pushes that to from February to June. That will create a 6 or 7 month season 23. Well, we have lived through those kind of extended seasons before. That was different because if this delay does exist, it's really last minute because the new season's about to start in a month. And I would very, very much doubt that they have something planned like a 30th anniversary event, which happened midway through the season of The Lost when The Witch Queen got delayed, as a way to kind of tide players over. Secondly, the game was not in like total disaster mode when this happened last time. And if there is suddenly a very lengthy 6-month season there, you're going to lose a lot of players that were already, falling off the boat given recent events. But if a season drags on for just an endless amount of time like that, you're going to see even more drop off than before. And then by the nature of the final shape being the final thing in the Light and Dark saga, that too is going to be a natural drop off point for many players, despite the fact that they've announced these standalone episodes. Like the continuous narrative that we've been following for all these years is sort of at least temporarily over. Oh, shit, sorry, I was just coughing. That is, it's a much different situation, and there have not officially been announced any new expansions for the game. The obvious thought was they're going to keep doing yearly expansions. We'll start a new saga, but everything seems pretty up in the air right now. If they are taking away this many, resources from Destiny, this is likely dozens and dozens of employees from what we've seen. Bungie has not announced how many people have been cut, but it's a fair amount and some very important roles, obviously. So that's certainly they've also delisted a bunch of job postings for people they were looking to hire. I think they went down from like 70 to 30 or something. So they're hiring less, and it really seems. I think all of this started specifically like the road to leading here is when they had to add Lightfall in as an in-between expansion before the final shape. And in a sense, that means the final shape has already been delayed, like essentially a full year. And as we know, trying to cobble together an expansion that probably didn't need to exist at all results in something like Lightfall, which I would say is the worst received expansion in the series history. I think an actual worse expansion is Shadowkeep, in terms of like the content it actually gave us, and yet that came in a much different era where it's like, okay, this is just, it's underwhelming. Like, the campaign wasn't really much to speak of. You're like assembling an armor set, but like the moon's pretty cool. Like it's cool to see that back. Lightfall is something else. Lightfall was like overtly bad to the point where it was like upsetting, where Shadowkeep is just sort of disappointing. And that turned a lot of people off. I think even despite like the fact that seasonal quality has been pretty good, I thought, I forget what it's called, but the season that launched, season of the Hunt, no, wait, that's not right. Whatever the season is that launched, season of the Risen? Whatever. The season that launched with Lightfall was actually okay. Deep was not great. There were some interesting ideas. And then Witch is pretty good. Witch is a pretty good season, but it still just feels like the game has been, declining since Lightfall, since this decision was made. And there's a lot of talk about like, oh, Sony must have demanded this. Like Sony bought them and they're demanding all these cuts. I don't think that's true. I think this may be, partially like Bungie looking to shed costs so they can prove they're more, revenue flexible for Sony. But I don't think it was Sony going through and picking these people that were firing people like Salvatore. This is a Bungie management problem. This is essentially what has been said publicly among people who are allowed to talk about it. This is what I've heard privately, that fundamentally this is a Bungie management problem that has been going on for a long time, and decisions made a long time ago are essentially coming home to roost now. This is not like naming specific people or specific decisions or whatever, but the general sentiment is that most of the problems that Bungie endures, or the bad times, are Bungie's management's fault. And we did this whole thing about, when they were under Activision, Activision's the one making all these bad decisions, and that may have been true to some extent with things like the timetables that were too aggressive, but there's always been these sort of issues. There were issues when Bungie was independent, and now there's issues when Bungie is under Sony. Well, these, the people they are partnered with or owned by or whatever, no doubt has something to do with this. All of this, the buck really stops with Bungie management. And if it's truly so beyond their control that Sony is ruining everything, well, they shouldn't have made this deal in the first place then. And that was on Bungie management too. But I don't think that's what's happening. Sony's biggest mistake, I think, was imagining how this was going to go. The fundamental reason they bought Bungie was like, yes, they thought Destiny 2 would just print money, which, it does, but now it is very much struggling. But it was mainly to get Bungie to teach these other single-player devs how to make live service games. And I don't think that's even like a reasonable ask for Bungie. It's like catching lightning in a bottle, like in which you get one of these games that actually works. And Sony is ignoring countless developers, really high-profile developers that try to do this exact thing, where they try to do single-player games, or they were really good at making single-player games, and they tried to do multiplayer games, and they just failed horribly. And then they went back to exactly what they were doing. Obviously, BioWare tried Anthem, failed. They're going back to Mass Effect. Gearbox tried Battleborn, failed, going back to Borderlands. Crystal Dynamics, Avengers, failed, going back to Tomb Raider. So this has happened many, many times before. And as good as you may be at making really gripping, powerful single-player content, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to do that and replicate that in a live service multiplayer game. And we'd heard previously that Bungie was looking over The Last of Us Factions and didn't think it was very good. And like now that project may not even exist anymore. It's kind of unclear. And it's Sony like really, really went crazy investing in this live service idea. That's like 60% of their budget, and essentially having almost all of their big studios making some sort of multiplayer version of their game. And given what we've just said about, the single player devs that have tried this other places and it's gone terribly, that seems like a terrible idea. And I don't think that Sony should have believed that Bungie could single-handedly fix that, nor do I believe that Bungie should have been like, oh yeah, we can totally do that, if that's, what they were saying. So that's the extent of, I think, Sony's involvement here. Fundamentally, I think these problems all come back to Bungie's management itself. And it is very hard for me to see how kind of the ship is going to be turned around from here for at least Destiny. The idea, like they are very, very much needing Destiny to float them to Marathon, and then they really, really need Marathon to be a big hit. The dream is that they would just keep expanding and keep supporting, both games and future projects. And we were supposed to be getting like, expansions of the Destiny universe and maybe like a Destiny mobile game and, maybe a different genre Destiny game, stuff like that. But they're shrinking the company now. I can't imagine Sony is terribly pleased at the moment, and everything's getting delayed, including Marathon. So it's such a weird place right now. And they've lost not just fan support, but like you can read the tweets of these Bungie employees that were not fired, and they're like, excruciating. They're like, this is so unexpected. Like all my friends are gone. Like Cosmo is like, this is my worst day at Bungie. And like, these are people who are still there. So like some layoffs like this, have deeper ramifications than just the game is going to get worse. Like these people now have to find new jobs, which is very bad. Like they have reverberations all over the place, including the employees that remain, because not only are you incredibly demoralized to see some sort of unexpected layoff like this, especially when your management said a year ago that because of the Sony deal, there would not be layoffs. I guess the statute of limitations expired on that. But now you don't know if you could be the next person out the door as soon as, Destiny isn't making more money. And I think Bungie's ideas before this, I was going to do a whole separate video on this, or like I was going to make something before this even happened about like, is Bungie just hard up for money? Because the amount of microtransactions they have forcibly injected into this game without backtracking on really any of them. There used to be some sort of like ebb and flow of what was offered in Eververse and what wasn't, and that has almost not happened at all. The only thing that happened recently was they put the Eververse armor set in the playlist because people were losing their shit that they had literally like broken a promise and did not do that. So that's one thing. But like the sheer amount of monetization that they have, goosed the game up with over the years, especially the last year or two, has been insane. And that got me wondering, like, I kept thinking in the Microsoft comment from the trial about, they looked at buying Bungie, but the burn rate was really high. And that means you're spending a lot of cash to maintain this giant live service game, which requires a lot of revenue to continue to be able to fund itself in addition to making the company itself money. So that feels like where we've ended up here, where it is very expensive and very difficult to be pumping out the amount of content we're seeing in these seasons. You may not like all of the content, but it is a tremendous amount of work. It is a ton of money. So it is a very difficult thing to do. But now it's even more difficult when your community is screaming at you for bad decisions, or at least screaming at the management. You have a lot of well-liked employees fired. You have the other employees demoralized by that. You have delays that screw up the entire live release schedule and will probably create these weird voids of nothing to do in your live game because this is such a scramble. And like, it's a disaster all around. So Destiny like cannot just die on the spot. It's not how it works. I still think we're going to get these episodes. I think there will probably be more expansions in the future. I think they will still start a new saga, but whether the player base sticks around for that or continues to just slide off, whether Bungie keeps laying people off or moving people to other projects as opposed to continuing to hire up for Destiny to, redouble their efforts there or really maintain that community, or, like we know things have, not been great, but like here we're really going to deliver. That just seems more unlikely than ever now. If this is the path they're taking, if they're doing these layoffs, like it is the industry. There have been a lot of layoffs besides Bungie, and like it's been horrific to watch the entire industry go through this. But Bungie with a live game, with the recent Sony acquisition, how reliant they are on getting these new IPs out, the scheduling of everything, it's a lot worse. I wrote about this. It's a lot worse than I would say a normal series of delays and layoffs, I think, given the context here. I don't know what happens next. I think, even whatever, they're going to do a whole announcement about next season in, a couple of weeks here. They'll start doing their normal previews. Like on their end, it will probably be business as usual, although I don't even know if there's anyone left to write a TWAB this week. I know like there are social team members, there are comms team members that remain. I think Bruno is left on comms. He's someone who's written a number of TWABs, but not a great look firing your most prominent faces for something like this. This is an era where we need more communication than ever because everything seems so scrambled, and you're getting rid of giant chunks of your social and comms team. It's crazy. It's crazy. I talked about this yesterday, but I still can't get over it. And now we've learned the greater extent of this. We're like, this hit tons of areas. This hit QA, legal, recruiting, player support. There's, and then music, obviously. And the Salvatore thing is just like, the crown here. And it feels like the people who are actually responsible for how this mess went down are not paying any sort of price for this that we know of. There's, the famous Iwata salary cuts to like save revenue and employee jobs when Nintendo was performing poorly, but we rarely ever see, executives held to justice. The most shocking thing that's happened this year is John Riccitello of Unity resigning after that disastrous thing. Like, that was surprisingly someone who actually paid the price in management for a terrible decision, and that almost never happens. So, I don't know what happens from here, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything good. Even, we go through these cycles of, everyone gets sick of the season by the end. Everyone's hyped up for the new season. The game kind of drags throughout the year towards the end, but then the big expansion comes. But that's all gone now. I don't think there's going to be almost any hype until maybe up till the final shape itself hits. But even then, I don't know. Granted, that's 7 months away at this point, so we'll see what community sentiment is. They have to communicate more stuff publicly before then in terms of their future plans. Like, I doubt they're going to comment on like specific layoffs other than like generic bullshit about how it's sad. But more than ever, they really need to be communicating with players like what the hell the plan is, what's the new schedule, why we should still have faith in them, and don't know how they're going to be able to do that without most of their comms team. So yeah, good luck. Okay. So I'm still very mad about this. I don't know how many videos I'll make about this, but probably quite a few as new things keep coming out. Actual gaming stuff, I've been a little bit into Alan Wake right now, which is very fun. I'm still playing the Diablo season, which I'm really enjoying. And that's pretty much what I'm working on now. But I don't know, maybe I'll do an Alan Wake video later, but obviously this is the most pressing story of the moment and something that deserves, I think, continued commentary. I'm going to start watching kind of all my fellow compatriots, streamers, and YouTubers' takes on this, as I'm very curious to check those out. I know Astacross and Fallout are working on something right now about this. But yeah, so thanks for watching. I'm still sick. My video yesterday was like by far one of my most viewed videos in a very long time. Like, I get everyone wants to know about it, but like, it sucks that it has to be under these circumstances. Like, it's so shitty for everyone involved. Like, obviously the most for the people who got let go, but like the community morale's destroyed, employee morale's destroyed, like everything seems up in the air. It's not good. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we will all keep talking about this. So take care.